believe he did not.
He did not recuse himself from this case. And in fact, he used his seat on the Supreme Court after all of this to rule in Singer's favor. And following the decision, Mr. Singer's hedge fund was ultimately paid $2.4 billion. Not a bad return on investment for a fishing trip there.
Got him. We fucking got him.
So while Republicans continue to waste taxpayer dollars on Hunter Biden gas stoves and whatever this was that I happened to stumble upon out of context yesterday.
I put some lube on and got him on his knees. He asked me to turn over while he slipped a condom on himself.
Well, Democrats are using their time to actually address third-party influence in positions of power. We had fast-rising Democrat Robert Garcia use his time on the House floor yesterday to remind his colleagues across the aisle of someone who actually was in office enriching themselves in the amount of billions.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to urge House Republicans to investigate one of the modern American scandals and political cons. Now, why did the Saudi government give Jared Kushner $2 billion just months after he left the Trump White House? Kushner, who oversaw Middle East policy for his father-in-law, has enriched himself and his family in what is clearly an enormous grift and likely serious conflict of interest crimes. So let's review. First, Jared Kushner conned his way to a cushy White House job with no clear job description and no experience. Then he took it upon himself to prioritize pushing out the U.S. Secretary of State so he could cozy up to the Saudi government. Now, once he was close enough to the Saudis, we have records of a $110 billion arms deal between the U.S. and Saudi Arabia that was inflated at the direction of Jared Kushner. Then, mere months after Kushner exits the White House, what happens? The Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia overrules his own investment advisors and sends $2 billion to Kushner's company's bank account. Now, in the exact words of Republican Chris Christie, who I'll quote, "The grift from this family is breathtaking. It's breathtaking. Jared Kushner and Ivanka Kushner walk out of the White House and months later get $2 billion from the Saudis."
But then AOC, who during a hearing today was surgical in her condemnation of the Supreme Court. You know, those beacons of justice like Samuel Alito being carted off on luxury trips by people who just so happen to come under investigation, in which those same justices failed to recuse themselves of. Just completely normal behavior, right?
And one last note of business, I'd like to say thank you to the many groups and organizations that reached out in anticipation of this hearing today with letters outlining their stances on the issue. I'd like to enter into the record letters to the committee from the American Tort Reform Association, American Property Casualty Insurance Association, the Advanced Medical Technology Association, the Institute for Legal Reform, the International Legal Finance Association, National Association of Manufacturers, Jerry Theododro at the R Street Institute, without objection, so ordered. All right, and then, okay. I would now like to yield 5 minutes to Ms. Ocasio-Cortez.
Thank you, and I thank for the listing of all the special interests involved in addition in this hearing.
Well, I'll let AOC tell you the rest.
I first heard that the Republican side was going to be calling a hearing on third-party influence in our courts. I was so excited because I thought, finally, we are going to address the biggest scandal in American democracy that we are currently having right now, which is the extraordinary corruption and wholesale purchase of members of the Supreme Court. And I also find it amusing that we just heard from the Republican side, why do we want to talk about this? Because women have lost the right to choose, because Indigenous people have lost rights, because minorities have lost rights, because working people across the country have lost rights due to this level of corruption. And if we're going to talk about third parties, let's talk about the Federalist Society, which has not only had deep ties to Justice Clarence Thomas and his wife Ginny, but has also helped choose judicial nominees for the Republican Party and directed multi-million-dollar media campaigns to confirm them, including a multi-million-dollar media campaign for Justice Alito, who seems to like using the Wall Street Journal as his personal press secretary. He did not recuse himself from this case. And in fact, he used his seat on the Supreme Court after all of this to rule in Singer's favor. And following the decision, Mr. Singer's hedge fund was ultimately paid $2.4 billion because of this ruling. Not a bad return on investment for a fishing trip there. Now, Professor Clark, would a federal judge in a lower court be required to recuse themselves?
The gentlelady's time has expired.
May I answer the question, sir?
I think the discretion of the chair, yes, you can answer
Thank
the
you,
question.
sir. Yes, there's a federal statute, I believe it's 28 U.S.C. 455, that does require recusal by both justices and judges under certain circumstances.
Thank you.
Now, Alito is not alone, far from it. We all remember the uncovering of Clarence Thomas's cozy relationship with billionaire and major Republican donor Harlan Crow, involving just the usual private jets, more luxury vacays, completely normal stuff.
But there are a lot of flamboyantly rich guys who do have a real interest in keeping Clarence Thomas on the court. People who share his vision, his right-wing ideology, who want him to rule in line with that vision. And so some of these people seem to have created a way of letting Thomas kind of have his cake and eat it too. Thomas stays put on the court in his supremely important, though, public sector job, and his wealthy right-wing supporters pay for him to live like a rich guy.
The fact of the matter is the American public want action. The American public is disgusted. Public confidence in the United States Supreme Court has plummeted. We can go back and forth as to what the cause is, but a lot of the American public are increasingly seeing the justices as politicians in robes. And now, after the revelations about Justice Thomas, as corrupt politicians in robes. They want an investigation. They want the truth.
But here's the thing. While Republicans are floundering to try and piece together shreds of nothingness regarding somebody who's never been in office, all to justify wasting taxpayer dollars on an impeachment that even numerous members of their own party are against,
of the Republican Party who serve in Congress don't agree with him. So much so that they're on record saying things like this. David Joyce, Congressman, I'm not seeing the facts or evidence. Dusty Johnson, there's a constitutional and legal test that you have to meet with evidence, and I haven't seen it. Don Bacon, there should be a direct link to the president and some of the evidence. I think we need to have more concrete evidence to go down that path. And then Ken Buck, the time for impeachment is the time when there's evidence linking President Biden, and I don't think that evidence has been presented.
2 days ago, you said that the time for impeachment is when there's evidence linking President Biden to a high crime or misdemeanor. You said, quote, that doesn't exist right now. Do you still feel that way tonight?
I have not seen any evidence that links President Biden to Hunter Biden's activities at this point. I will be getting a briefing later in the week. I'm looking forward to understanding more of what the Oversight Committee has uncovered. But at this point, I have not seen that evidence.
Reckless legislative joyride that the extremists are trying to take the American people on, which may end in a government shutdown that will hurt the American people, hurt business, and hurt the economy, falls squarely at the feet of the extremists in the House Republican Conference. And it's our hope that some common sense will prevail. But as Catherine Clark indicated, there are no moderates left in the House Republican Conference. They talk a good game, but at the end of the day, they all do the same exact thing: bend the knee to Donald Trump.
Democrats, well, they prove yet again that their focus is on actual instances of corruption and malpractice within the highest branch of office.
We sit here, we hear our colleagues bring up certain things like, oh, the Biden family took money from a foreign entity, right? And it's just like, well, really? I mean, do they really not know that Jared Kushner took $2 billion from the Saudis? I mean, by the way, they go on Twitter and blame the Saudis for 9/11. But then Jared Kushner, who, by the way, was not a wealth expert before he worked in the White House, nor was he a Middle East expert before he worked there, gets $2 billion from the Saudis, and they don't have any questions.
Hey, Meidas Mighty, love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram @MeidasTouch to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.